Morning, everybody. My name's Colin White, and I'm the founder of Credit Connect Media. Welcome to the Online Collections Technology Think Tank. This morning, we've called this Collections Technology Think Tank 3.1. It's our fourth edition of the event. And our aim with each event is to bring together collections professionals to discuss collection strategies and assess the relationship between people and technology. Today, we're here from a number of high-profile collections professionals and see if we can gain any learnings in how collections strategies can play a role in producing the best customer outcomes as we learn to live with the COVID-19 pandemic in the UK. All of today, we've got 4 sessions planned, and this is the first of those 4. So I'll just share with you quickly an outline of the other sessions that are coming up. I already have done that. So the first one, starting now, is talking about collections risk and the relationship between technology and people. We'll have a break at 10:25 before we go into our next session, which you'll need to log in and log out of. If you signed up to the event, you will get notifications about that already. But there's a link in this in your panel, which I'll talk about in a minute, where you can sign in for the next one. And the next one is at 10:45, where we'll talk about customer engagement. We've got a good panel ready for that one. Vulnerable customers and affordability is at 11:55 after our break, and then we'll break for 15-20 minutes at 12:40, and for a 1 o'clock session we'll finalise with the day with a Future of Collections session. So lots of panelists lined up for that. Just a really quick run through with you, we've got a interactive board in front of you of platform of what you can do in terms of interacting with this event. So if you have a look at the eye at the top of the screen, that will give you information on today's event, which you can see. The speech bubble is the important one there. If you can ask questions throughout, that'd be great. We'll put them to the panel. Anything we don't cover off, we will cover off in our event review, which will be on the Credit Connect website this time next week. So feel free to ask those questions, get involved. Feel free to share this on LinkedIn and Twitter via the hashtag CollectionsTechTT. We'd love for people to get involved wherever it is. But if you want to get questions to our panel, then use the speech bubble. Then we've got a little icon which shows a people icon. That's information on all of our speakers, a bit of background to them. Have a look at that. And then we've also got a resource tab, which looks like a folder. Click on that, and that gives you lots of resources which you can click on. Again, have a look at that. We've got lots of little links in there, a bit of information about the Credit Connect and some of our past and present events coming up, but also some information from our sponsor, which today of this session is called CoolMiner. So we'd like to thank CoolMiner for their sponsorship of this session, but it's very much a discussion panel today. So please stay tuned in, and we hope you enjoy the event. So in this session, we're going to look at collections risk, and to note today, there's no doubt the last 2 years have been pivotal for all collections teams and businesses as we venture into the unknown landscape of the pandemic. And rising household costs, which Vanessa will cover off in a minute, will be a key theme this year, and we're going to get a bit more direction on that today, I think, with some various announcements. But I'll hand over to Vanessa to talk about that in a sec. But we hope everybody who tunes in today enjoys it, gets involved, gives us feedback as well. We've got some feedback questions through a number of polls that we're running throughout the event. So please give us your honest feedback after that. We're always looking at ways we can improve our event. So we'd really like that if you can get involved. And yeah, as I said, let's hand over then. So I think a lot of you familiar face in the industry is Vanessa Northam from Step Change. I'm going to hand over to Vanessa now, who's going to chair all 4 of our sessions. And I'll firstly hand over to her, and she can introduce herself, and then our panelists. Vanessa, over to you.
Thanks very much, Colin. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on what will be a big day for announcements. We're expecting an announcement from Ofgem on the price cap, which obviously has been flooded in the news, and in addition to the potential impending cost of living crisis. So these events always seem to take place at a really pertinent time. I think the first one we did in the peak of the pandemic, we were waiting for Rishi Sunak to announce extension of furlough. So today we're competing with that announcement, and I'm sure all of you are ready to receive that information and what that means for your customers, your colleagues, and also forecasts in terms of collections activity. So this panel is very much focused on collections risk and understanding the risks in terms of from technology and people and the best mix. But before I do that, I think it's fair to say we have got a fantastic panel. This is going to be a discussion. It's not a panel. It's a conversation. I'm not going to be doing creeping death and asking each of our panelists to answer the same questions 3 times. So it is an interactive discussion. So if you vehemently disagree with any of our panelists, pop a question in. If you want the conversation to go in a different direction, then please pop a question in. We really want to hear from you. So yes, we have locked the cats away. We have cancelled our Amazon deliveries and we are ready to go. So I'd like to introduce our panel. And I'm going to start with Frank Sherlock from Core Miner, and Frank's going to introduce himself. And I've asked the panelists to prepare just a couple of insights of what they've really learned over the last 2 years since the start of the pandemic. So Frank, over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. The pneumatic drill's just about to start in the roadworks. Now it's not. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Frank. I'm the General Manager and VP for Core Miner in EMEA. Core Miner are a conversation analytics company. So we help our organizations convert all of the data that's happening in these conversations they're having with their consumers to help them basically to improve business outcomes, to provide better targeted, focused coaching and guidance to the agents, deliver fairer and better outcomes for the consumer, and help transform their business. And so I'll be very much looking at this today from a using data as a technology within collections. So really looking forward to the conversation with Mark and Richard.
Thanks very much, Frank.
But Vanessa, sorry, I didn't talk about. You asked me about any observations that I had. I think that I think collections have realised over time that there's a reason why people are not paying, and helping to address that is the best, and I think it's the most sustainable way to help our fellow humans succeed and recover from financial difficulty. Some of our clients have said to me, we do a lot of work within financial services and collections, and right party contact rates are starting to improve, but obviously with the forbearance and everything else that's sort of coming to a close, they've been suffering with during the pandemic with higher attrition rates, as perhaps agents who were working from home. It's not quite the same as it was when it was in the office, or with, there's a general shortage of good staff within contact center. The grass is greener. So they've been suffering a little bit with attrition from that perspective. But one of the encouraging things, one of them was talked to me last week, that a lot of people now they're going back to a sort of hybrid type working. A lot of people that had left are coming back. So some interesting dynamics there that we're seeing as a result of the pandemic and the change in circumstance. And but there is a general worry about the future cost of living crisis. I think it's referred to that's on the horizon, with lots and lots of changes in national insurance, inflation, mortgage rates, energy. The list seems to be endless. Of there's going to be less and less disposable income. So that's my little quick insight and intro. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Frank. I'm going to come over to Mark now. I heard last week that last year car production figures were the lowest for decades. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah.
Can you introduce us and allude to that?
Yeah, you're seeing some interesting movement in second-hand car prices because of what's happening with new car production issues. Normally, you buy a second-hand car and it reduces in value, but we've been seeing it actually increasing in value. It's one of the we've spoken a lot about this cost of living crisis and inflationary pressure. Second-hand car prices increasing, and certainly one of the things feeding inflation going up. But it's nice to meet you all. My name's Mark Porter. I'm the head of customer operations at Udall Car Finance. I've only been there 3.5 weeks. They're a fintech. They are one of the fastest growing motor finance providers in the UK. Prior to joining Udall, I was the head of collections at Motonovo Finance. So motor finance again, with a little bit of personal loans thrown in there. And I was at Motonovo for 5 years. They're part of First Rand Bank, which is a South African banking group. I don't know if I want to admit it, but I've got over 20 years experience in regulated financial services, mostly collections, recoveries, asset disposal. So I'm sort of showing my age a little bit there. In terms of insights, I think that, we've come out of COVID in a very different world to what we entered. I think that the very fact that we're all sitting on screens now talking, I think, is a sign of that. I think that the way customers want to interact has evolved and changed. I think that certainly looking at all the twists and turns we've had to deal with the last couple of years, the ability to scale up is really important. How do you deal with increased volumes of customers wanting help? Recognizing that customers are a group of people that can't easily be picked on. They all have different needs, different requirements. But I also think a big lesson has been the whole people side of things in terms of the staff, the people working in collections and recoveries. There is an enormous amount of responsibility placed on these people now. I think there's been a lot of talk around collections shouldn't really be called collections anymore. It's more like an arrears resolution type interaction. And I think when you think of it in that way, I think that's really coming to sharp focus during the COVID years. It's about understanding customers and adapting and trying to support them and get them back on their feet. So getting that staff well-being piece right, because we're talking a lot about customer vulnerability. And I think that's, for me, is one of the things that as an industry, and it'll be something we can talk about this morning, is a big consideration around technology, vulnerable customer treatment and support, and how do we make sure that we're really being ethical and doing right by people. So that's a little bit of a run through me. It's nice to meet you all, and looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. And congratulations on the new role.
Yeah, thank you.
Richard, so it's your turn to impart your wisdom, but first off, just explain who's Zinc-R and your role there.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Richard. I'm head of digital development for the Zinc Group. The Zinc Group are primarily a collections and recoveries business. We also do some business process outsourcing as well, so customer service, which is probably one of the fastest growing parts of the business, to be fair, going back to what Mark said and Frank. The conversation between businesses and customers is evolving. And I think in the last 10 years, even before COVID, we'd seen a very different approach to the way in which we view the people that we engage with on a daily basis. I'm going to, like Mark, I'm going to show my age a bit here. I've been in the business coming up for 20 years. It's probably this way, on the first day in the job, I brush my hair. And I'm having Zinc. And the conversation and the way we view people has changed dramatically. It changed dramatically about 10 years ago when regulation, things like that began to change. And COVID has really accelerated things. I think for me, one of the biggest, there's two things that I look at currently. In terms of a business proposition, I think you have to be ready to adapt. And once you've adapted, get ready to adapt again. Because things are constantly changing, particularly within the digital markets. And I always look at Microsoft in this type of situation. Microsoft is 29 years old and is currently on Microsoft Windows 11, which makes it sound like they've only had 11 incarnations of Windows. They've actually had in excess of 23, 24 incarnations of the same operating system. So that's an upgrade about every 12, 15 months since they've been in business. And that tells you everything you need to know about that space, is that you've got to move with the times because customers demand it. Microsoft are looking to deliver something better, not just because they want to, but because their customers expect it. 10 years ago, you couldn't watch a video online. Now we all stream Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. If you're in this household, we've got just about everything that's got any kind of cartoon on to keep a 6-year-old quiet through the day. And if you look at that, the way in which your own family behaves when you're relaxing, it's very, very different to what it was even 5-10 years ago. So the consumer experience is constantly evolving, and that's accelerated in the last 2 years. People are going online because they've had no choice but to go online, but they're staying there. So they're enjoying the opportunity to engage from a distance. But that doesn't mean to say that we have to make the whole proposition less personal. In fact, it puts more pressure on you to make it more personal through the lack of personal engagement. So if you're not doing face-to-face, voice-to-voice, make it feel like it's important to you as a business so that the customer wants to engage. The second part of my observations would be people, our people. The way in which we train people, invest in people has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. We're not just looking at what customers want anymore. We're looking at what our people want, looking to meet the expectations of staff. So whether that's hybrid working, whether it's more flexible shift patterns, or investment in training, investment in technology, it has to go both ways. Your workforce has to be able to adapt to meet the changing needs of the customer.
Well, I think you'll agree we've got a stellar panel and so many areas of, that we could go in this conversation. But I want to kind of reflect on what you've said there. We're talking about the customer. We're talking about customer experience. You know, is that going to be an actual concept from a collections perspective now? Because collections was very binary 20 years ago, very telephony, and we know now that there's been an absolute transformation. So my opening question to you is, what is the right mix? What's the right blend of technology and people from both, you know, a customer expectation? Because you're absolutely right, Richard, you know, people expect to do absolutely everything online, and indeed have done. Is collections there? Has it got it right? And then what's the role of people? So whoever wants to go first and start the ball rolling.
I think on that issue of the blend of technology versus people, there's a variable that you have to include every single time when you're looking at either side of that equation, and that's choice. And it's giving customers the choice at either end of that. So if you're engaging with a customer through a digital channel and the customer opts to use that channel to talk to you, they must have that choice to flip into a live agent if possible, and vice versa. So if a customer's talking to a live agent, there's nothing wrong with either side of that conversation presenting a digital option. Did you know, customer, that you can go here? And whether that's telling the customer that they can go to a portal, for example, out of hours, or there's more information there that they can find, just making customers aware that they have that choice. And I think that has to remain present throughout. So even when you're talking about automated chats in terms of chatbots, things like that, is having a parachute option so the customer can get in and out of that digital engagement. Of course, that changes out of hours, but I think customers that engage out of hours expect to only see those digital options. And for many customers, whether it's shift patterns, work-life balance, whatever, they might only have that option to engage with you digitally in a meaningful way. I think to your earlier point, Vanessa, about collections changing, being binary a few years ago. Collections, let's take it back 20 years ago so I can wash my hands a little bit, but it was a numbers game, collections. It really was. It's how many people can we engage with through letter and phone and see what we can achieve through that. Now it isn't. It's a personal issue. It's an engagement. It is customer centric. It's talking to people exactly the same way that you would at the front end if you were trying to entice them into the business, to spend money with you, to treat them with the same dignity and respect, and give them the same number of options.
Yeah, I'd agree, Richard. And I think that you know, it's a massive topic, you know, people, technology and digital transformation, everything else. But ultimately, you know, the role of the collector, for me anyway, is when they reach a consumer, to spend time carefully understanding that customer situation and applying the right outcome for the customer, whether you do that via the voice channel, there are certain things, it's hard, I think, to have an outbound cold conversation about very, very specific and unique circumstances and coming to the right customer outcome with chatbots. But there is a role for chatbots. There are things like payments, etc. People should be using chatbots for that type of thing. But for me, and it'd be interesting, Mark, your view on this. Collections is a people business that has to be customer and consumer oriented, or it will not deliver the right outcomes for either end of that spectrum. Is my view.
Yeah, I think linked to that, Frank, I think one of the things that collections departments have historically struggled with, and this is where I'm not sure technology does help, is the concept of trust. I think that we sometimes forget that when people are in financial difficulties, it often takes an enormous amount of courage to engage with a lender and have that conversation. There can sometimes be a little bit of denial, and we've all encountered customers where you think, oh, if you'd engaged, we could have helped you. We could. There's options, debt signposting, etc., that could help you. And so I think technology, you're absolutely right. It's about providing choice. My rather critical view at an industry level is I think collections departments haven't quite got it right yet when it comes to that choice mix. I think that one subject I don't think we talk about probably enough is that whole piece around digital exclusion. I think Vanessa, you touched on this around the move to digital, and I referenced businesses needing to scale up. We all saw in COVID, literally overnight, massive spike in the number of people needing support with financial difficulties. I think a lot of lenders, if they didn't have digital capability, they very quickly realized they needed it. They needed technology to help them, just for getting choice, just to deal with the volume of customers that needed help and support. And I think now we're at a point in the journey where we're coming through COVID. We need to look back and learn some lessons as an industry. What worked, what didn't work. Are we really getting the whole user experience piece right for customers? But my point around digital exclusion is that there are a significant number of people out there who don't have easy access to the internet or to digital portals. There's always going to be a place for phone calls. There's always going to be people that want that human interaction. But also I think that when we're looking at customer needs, we've got to start listening a bit more to what those customers want. I think 24/7 access. Digital means a lot of different things to customers as well. And I've seen digital from simple data input tools, which can actually be quite frustrating for customers. What customers want is decisions. But I do think, from my perspective as well, coming back to the vulnerability points, this is a big area, certainly in financial services, that the regulators are focusing on. There is a risk as we embrace technology that we miss indicators of vulnerability, that we're not having that free-flowing interaction with the customers, because digital journeys can fall into the trap of being a bit step by step. So I do think that the industry has made leaps forward on that front. I think there are tools around keyword identification, customers disclosing vulnerability when they're going through, for example, a digital journey. How can you identify indicators the customers may be vulnerable? Certainly in MotorNova as well, we had an e-coms team that were there dealing with electronic interaction and looking at digital referrals where there was an indication that could be vulnerability. I still think there's a lot more we as an industry need to do to think about digital exclusion, to think about choice, but also to think about the customer journey. Are we really ticking all the boxes? Not sure we're quite there yet.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. I mean, we work across multiple sectors, and I know there's a separate session on vulnerability later on today. But people traditionally we've had the financial vulnerability, the health vulnerability, but the concept of digital vulnerability, needs to be adequately addressed. And ultimately, you mentioned about things like word spotting, etc. That's the sort of area we're in. But quite often when an agent or an associate's focused on the rise and the prize and trying to get the outcome, they miss the markers. It's just human nature. Yes. And technology will help support those markers and help you redress those areas. So absolutely agree with you on it.
So the report Step Change a couple of weeks ago, the credit safety net, so households that are using credit to pay for essentials. one of the stats from that saying that 53% of the people that we interviewed said that they would be fearful of contacting their creditor or bank. So what, you're saying, the sector's saying, collections has changed. We're going to likely see a new cohort of consumers who are financially vulnerable for the first time, who have no direct experience of collections, but may be very fearful from what they've heard in the past. What is the role of digital in breaking down that stigma, and what, how can that help encourage that opening up, but it's still flexible enough to channel shift when it's identified that there's a complex need here?
Well, it certainly overrides, I think, the embarrassment factor. For a lot of people, it's quite scary picking up the phone. They think they're going to be judged. I think digital is something that is perhaps easier. You can go online at a time and a place that suits you, and you're not having to deal with a human being. Now, the reality is collections staff don't judge. They want to help and support. But I think there is that perception, and I think that your step change insights are really useful to help us map out a way forward. Because again, there is that fear, that lack of trust, and I think that there's still that fear that when you engage with lenders, and if I use car finance as an example, the end result is going to be losing your car. Well, actually, our goal here is to keep you in your vehicle, to help you get back on your feet. But I do think when it comes to digital journeys, the user experience piece is really important. And we've all seen great examples of digital journeys and some pretty horrific ones as well. Overcoming that fearfulness, overcoming that maybe lack of trust, starts with the way information is presented, making sure that the digital solution works on a telephone, an iPad, a desktop, making sure that you're actually looking at the interaction from a customer point of view, the way information is input into a digital journey, making sure those digital journeys have help sections. And one of the key things, I think, for customers that choose to interact through digital is that the worst thing is you get to a point in the journey where you need some help and then you have to pick up the phone. So there needs to be some way of interacting electronically through the digital journey. And I think, certainly looking at what we did at MotorNovo, and we had two-way secured messaging capability. We had a help section with debt signposting within the journey. The wording within the digital journey was all designed to keep reassuring the customer that we want to help. There was context around questions, so it wasn't like an interrogation. So I think embracing the whole user experience piece and coming at it from a customer perspective, but also asking and getting feedback through surveys, asking customers what worked and what didn't work. And then also looking at the end result of the digital interaction. Are we agreeing solutions that actually worked? And if they worked, great. Why? If they didn't work, why didn't they work? So there's that continuous improvement culture as well.
I think it's important as well that digital should be an option by invitation. I think there's a temptation in some circumstances to present certain swathes of customers with a digital only option. And I think the moment that you do that with any kind of environment with a customer where you go, this is the option and it's option A, there is no B, then immediately you alienate a percentage, whether it's a large percentage or a small percentage of that particular customer base, that they're gone. So digital should certainly be an option, but it should be by invitation. It should be a supplement to anything else that you're doing. However, it can take a primary focus depending on where that customer is. And I think that the point that you made earlier, Vanessa, is a critical one. We're getting people that are coming into a position of being indebted that this is totally new to them and terrifying for many reasons. And a lot of those reasons will be social, will be how they feel about this. The practicalities of being in debt will actually be a secondary issue for them. And coming back to your point, Mark, that anonymity option is often the best way to start engagement. You've got to be ready for a customer that knocks on the digital door to eventually walk through your personal door as well, because digital is a really, really good way of letting your customers sample your business, to let them walk around the office and take a look at you, take a look at your culture and find out what your motivation is. Frank, you made a point earlier about collectors keeping their eye on the prize.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to change the prize.
Yeah.
The prize 10 years ago was perhaps payment in full, followed by 3 installments, followed by, and then it goes down. That was the old way of looking at things. The prize is very different these days. I think for any good business, the prize is the engagement piece. That's the most critical element. This is what we're about. This is what we should be about, is creating an environment where customers can engage. So whether that's coming through and talking to an agent over the phone and being treated like a customer, or giving a customer the advantage of being able to deal with their account at 3 o'clock in the morning by logging on. And that point you made, Mark, is absolutely crucial. When you're building digital technology, don't just look at it on a laptop or a desktop. See how it works on a phone, and see how it works on a phone that's 5 years old, because you're probably going to be talking to customers that have either had to get out of their £600 smartphone to pay a bill and downgraded to a lesser capable machine, and everything that's in between that. So it needs to work everywhere, because you might have a customer who can watch Netflix on that device, but your investment needs to allow them to use that technology that you're delivering anywhere at any time, and make it personal. There's nothing wrong with a digital journey that talks to the customer, and in particular talks to their circumstances. One size does not fit all with digital.
No, we've got a question from our audience, and it's a good one. So hopefully you can weave what you were going to say into Richard into this question. So we all know this, but usually a person that is struggling financially is not across one product or service. So we know that a step change on average, people have nine debts and associated arrears. So are collection agencies sharing information to support a customer get out of debt altogether, and not just for one product service? Is there an open banking concept that collection agencies are looking at? Now, we've got an open banking session on later today. But that's a really good question, isn't it? You know, you've got I&E fatigue going, you know, I've got to speak to the council tax, the water, the energy. They're all wanting to do that. Yeah. What are your organisations looking at, or what's your view on that?
The issue there from our side of the table, from a DCA point of view, is that we would be tied up in so many regulatory issues there in terms of talking to each other about what we're dealing with particular customers, which is why we have a great need for organisations like Step Change, who kind of sit in the middle of that and bring everything together on behalf of the customer, and then send that engagement out to the various different agencies. I think, and I don't want to go too much into the open banking, but that open banking concept, and I don't think open banking is a particularly good name for the services that it delivers, to be perfectly frank. It's very much an open book. It's a very brave person who engages with that kind of technology, even at the front end when things are going fine. But when things are going bad, to actually say, come in and take a look at our accounts. I mean, how many businesses would be happy to do that? Come in and take a look at the books and take your time. And that's what we're saying to customers. Let us see absolutely everything. And these are people that perhaps are too afraid to pick up the phone in the first place. But that said, in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, maybe, certainly within 15, 20 years' time, we have a generation that's coming up behind us where that is the norm. Where, why wouldn't that? Because that's going to make my life so much easier when it comes to making purchases, making financial decisions, getting a mortgage, or changing a financial product, because somebody sat there on my behalf looking at all of the options available based on my circumstances. But we are a boomer generation, nation, a boomer nation. And we can't lose sight of that fact that the vast majority of people are on the wrong side of 40. Now, we've got a younger generation coming up, but you've got to cater for all demographics.
But don't you think as well, though, I mean, coming at it from a slightly different angle, Vanessa, before we talk about like lenders, etc., sending information, we don't make it as an industry that easy for the customers to give us themselves information. To your point, Vanessa, around they're often dealing with multiple creditors at the same time. When you look at most digital offerings, you will go in and you will have to give income and expenditure information. Quite often, these digital journeys will be very much, each company will ask you to complete their I&E journey. So make it easier. If a customer goes to a lender or they go to a debt advice organisation and complete an income expenditure form, they should be able to upload it onto the digital solutions at individual banks if they need to, rather than having to complete 10 different income expenditure forms for every creditor they're engaged with. Now, I know if they go to a debt advice organisation, it's a little bit easier because they will then send out I&Es and offers, etc. But the vast majority of customers, I think, unfortunately, still interact individually with each creditor. And the digital journeys don't seem to operate on the basis this customer is going to end up potentially having to complete 10 I&Es on each digital platform they engage with. We tried with MotorNova to help customers. By the end of the journey, they've completed the standard financial statement, allowing them to download the SFS in the SFS format so they can take it completed and give it to other lenders without having to complete it again. But even when I look at our digital journey there, customers still had to complete an I&E when they engage with us. We didn't give them the ability to upload one they'd already completed with another lender. So there are simple things I think we could do very quickly as an industry to just make it a little bit easier for customers, because it is absolutely exhausting for them having to talk to 10 different lenders around 10 different products, all with different views and opinions and different technologies, etc. I do think that things like income expenditure captured are pretty standard industry-wide. Let's make it easier to get that information from customers.
Completely agree, and there are organisations just doing that, but it's a, you know, is everybody ready for that sort of integration and APIs? You know, we've obviously got people from multiple sectors here.
Yeah.
You know, an industry is only good as its weakest link.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might have absolutely exemplary performance and digital toolkits at one end of the spectrum, and then at the end, it's like, you can't access this service. You're in collections, please ring us. So, you know, how, from a consumer perspective, you know, how does that come together? I mean, there has been movement. Is it there yet?
I think the other thing as well is that I think this is a great example, actually, the income and expenditure piece, because there's many variants of that in terms of not just what the I&E looks like. You've got your standard financial statement. Personally, I've yet to meet anybody who looks like the financial standard statement in terms of the average spend, in terms of expenditure, because it tends to take the national averages. And when you take in Mayfair, London, and the poorest parts of the UK and putting them in the same mix, you're not really getting any middle ground which anybody can recognise in themselves. So if we're going to standardise the way in which people give us the information, which I think is a great idea, we first have to go back to what that information looks like. And as a business ourselves, we have different variations of income and expenditure, from what you might term as a long form I&E to a short form. And then it comes down to the difference between a full-on I&E and affordability. What is the objective? That needs to be agreed on first. So whether it's the regulator's objective, the industry's objective, or the lender's objective, it needs to be standardized. What is it we want to understand about this customer? Do we need to know how much they're spending at the supermarket, or do we just need to know what their position is at the end of the month? Because unless as an industry, I'm able to encourage a customer to do different things with their money, which just saying that out loud sounds ridiculous. How could I? All I need to know is their end position. What are they capable of today? They have to decide themselves what they do with their I&E. So how much information do we need? We need a true account of what their position is. So I think we need to revisit that whole piece. So the standard financial statement isn't that standard. It's alien to most people. So we need to start there. That needs to be demolished, re-looked at, and then talk about how do we share that information? How do we make that easier for the customer? Because your point is absolutely spot on, Mark. If you're in a situation where you've just got 4 creditors and you're going to spend the day dealing with those 4 creditors, you're going to get 4 different interpretations of that financial standard statement, 4 sets of different priorities in relation to whether we need it or not. and you're probably going to give and deliver 4 different interpretations of your own financial position. Because the first time you do it, you might put a little bit of effort in. The second time, you realize what the end game is. So you start playing the game a little bit just through natural self-preservation. And by the 4th attempt, you're that exhausted, you'll just say anything to get off the call.
So a bit controversial here. The INE is obviously a cornerstone of pretty much all aspects of collections. It's the equivalent of going into the doctors, and before you even talk about your specific symptoms and why you're here today, it's can I have your height, your blood group, can I have this, that, and the other? And actually, the first thing you want to do to talk to the doctor is, these are my symptoms. And the doctor then starts to weave that conversation and then looks at those symptoms. Is there a thought whether income expenditure, can we ever see a time in collections where we don't have income and expenditure?
I mean, I don't, but I do see how tech can help with at the end of the day, when people are doing priority bills and talking about their discretionary expenditure, and one of our banking customers, the ability to have the online I&D present when there's a conversation with the consumer on the audio channel, and guide the agent to, hey, you said single residency for council tax, but there's 4 of you in the house or whatever, helping to using technology, I think, to help get to the right outcome for the customer, and integrating some of the digital stuff with the human stuff. We see a lot of, in the rush to digital, not necessarily just in collections, or not necessarily in collections, but where digital transformation breaks down. It's frustrating, but a lot of people will, when they go to the human channel, will say, hey, I was trying to make a payment, I was trying to arrange an appointment, I was trying to arrange a delivery on the website, on the mobile app. And you can then use that information when you see it at scale to feed forward. And Mark, you mentioned about surveys for, customer, how does the customer feel? Well, surveys traditionally don't have more than a 15% response rate. Yeah. But again, using technology to say, well, okay, what was the interaction? What was the quality? What was the DNA of the interaction that gave rise to the promotion or the detraction or the neutrality on the survey? What other interactions do we have in our universe that also meet that DNA, and therefore we have latency in our detractors, perhaps, that we need to intervene? So I think there's a long way to go with technology, and I think the joining up of digital and human channels, and the joining up of what happens on those channels to drive better customer outcomes is going to be the big challenge.
But beyond surveys, Frank, as you alluded to there, there's a lot of other information that give you insight into the customer experience. Where is the customer dropping out on a digital journey? You can see where customers are moving on screens. Is it really intuitive, the journey? Is it user friendly, etc.? But I think, coming back to your point, Vanessa, about income expenditures, I think that certainly in financial services, we need to recognise that there are some regulatory drivers behind what we're doing. And I think that's true of other sectors as well. We need to be able to evidence that whatever solution we come to is affordable and sustainable for the customer. One of the most easiest ways of doing that, of course, is to do an income expenditure assessment. The standard financial statement, I think, was a noble endeavour. Try to create a standardised approach, something where we're not all doing our own thing. I think it certainly needs a bit more work, and I would agree with your comments, Richard, that it definitely is not where it needs to be yet. I think it's quite intimidating for customers, the whole idea of doing an income expenditure form. I think it feels quite intrusive. I think lenders haven't quite got it right yet when it comes to positioning the need for an income expenditure. I think it's still a little bit tick box. I think when you do it right, it's part of a conversation, a dialogue with the customer. I want to help you. We can work together. Help me understand your situation. It's part of a discussion, whether that's through a digital engagement or over the telephone with a human being. But I do think, again, to echo what I was saying earlier, we need to make it easier for the customer to share information. And as various sectors dealing with customers in debt, whether it be council tax, utilities, financial services, we don't have a lot of cross industry discussion around engaging with people in debt. But I do think there's a lot of positives, though. We're talking about the negatives. I think there's some interesting concepts out there. Things like the vulnerability registration service is an interesting idea. I don't think it's taken off to the degree it could, but that's all around sharing information. I think there are organisations like the Money Advice Liaison Group, which look to bring the debt advice sector and others together for discussion. But I do think that the whole user experience piece and looking at the data, looking at what customers are doing through the digital journey, trying to make it things like income expenditure capture less of a form. So again, using the solution we had at MotorNovo as an example, it wasn't presented as a form to complete a long list of questions. It was, I always compare a little bit. It's like if you've ever been to a Disney theme park and you're in a queue for a ride, you think, oh, we're almost there, because Disney are very skillful at not letting you see what's ahead. And it's sort of, and I think that a good digital journey doesn't confront you with this massive long form, and it gives you very clear context. And so the customer wants to give you information because they see it's in their interest to do so. But I think what you're saying, Frank, as well, is really important. And your point, Vanessa, when you go to the doctors, you want to sit down first of all and tell the what's the problem, what's the issue, before you get anywhere near an income expenditure. I also think, as a final point for me, some financial services firms have fallen into the trap of doing an income expenditure for absolutely everybody that's in financial difficulties. An income expenditure needs to add some measurable value and increase your understanding of the customer situation. It shouldn't just be ticking a box. So you do not need an INE for absolutely everybody. But I think, one final thing I was going to add as well, sorry, and then I'll shut up. I also think, though, the whole point about income expenditure, which I think has started to emerge in recent years as well, is the whole thing around income maximisation. I know we used to deal with at MotorNovo an organisation called Income Max. It's about looking at what additional income is out there, and that's where debt advice is really important. Looking at what we can do to improve the income expenditure content, not just this is it. What can we do? What benefits can they go and claim? So, and that's the bit I don't think lenders are still great at. They signpost debt advice, but there's a lot of help out there for people, and improving access to that help to improve the financial position has got to be part of the journey.
I think that's a great point. We actually partner with an organisation, Policy and Practice, in terms of an INE journey that actually highlights, as you're going through, any additional benefits that you could be entitled to.
Yeah.
And we see this probably being more valuable to the people that we were talking about earlier, Vanessa, the people that are about to enter this world that have never been in it previously. So benefits and any support that they might be able to get through social means are totally alien to them. And they're just as entitled to them as anybody, but too afraid to even ask the question. Well, if you can put the answers before the question has even been asked. So incidentally, you're going through this, these are your circumstances, so therefore you're entitled to this. That maximization of income is critical. But you've also got to accept that it's critical for the customer and not the resolution of the situation you're particularly talking about in that moment.
I agree, Richard, but you've got to train your agents, or you've got to build your digital models to actually embrace that. The customers shouldn't need to go looking for it, searching for it, finding it. It should be more proactive. And when we talk, we spoke a lot about digital channels, and for me, digital channels are a good pull channel. There are people that are eager to engage, and just my ask would be, just make it easier, make it more complete, because and use your human people to have those really hard and complex and sometimes traumatic conversations with the consumers, and use data to train both models, train the digital models as to what's working, and train the humans to drive better outcomes. Because when you do that, your employees will feel more engaged. They'll feel they're doing the job. They'll deliver better customer outcomes, and the customers will feel happier. I think there's To me, use data. There's lots of data there. Find a way of capturing it and using it to improve the digital and human channels.
So it's going to be a real art form to start a digital journey with a much more open set of questions that, to your point, Mark, say, you know, what's brought you here today?
Yeah.
You know, we've switched banks, we've cancelled all our direct debits. I just want to make a payment. You know, if the next screen is right, okay, we need an income expenditure. You're just like alienating straight. I just want to make a payment. So there's, you know, there's a huge amount in this space. I think to your point there, Richard, about, you know, when someone leaves a conversation in collections, you know, now and ongoing in the future, is they've got a support package, not just a, oh, thank God for that, I've got them off my back. You know, that's where that is likely to engender future engagement, because it was a positive experience. You know, they then go on to Step Change or Income Max and go, wow, if I had made that call, I'd have never known I was entitled to that. We have got one last question that I do want to throw in, which is quite an interesting one, actually, about what is the role in collections around having conversations about preventing ongoing debt? I mean, if we're talking about resolutions and if we're talking about more of a customer experience, what's your thoughts on that?
Prevention starts with education. And I think we touched on this earlier, quite early in the discussion. We can start this in the classroom, which is great. And I think we're seeing more of that up and down the country. Is educating young people before they enter employment in terms of financial obligations and situations. But I personally don't worry about the younger generation, because they have a huge lesson that sits before them in form of our generation. They're kind of watching the world burn now, not from a relatively safe distance, but they're probably learning a lot from us. I think we need to educate adults in terms of options that are available to them, the dangers of doing certain things. We were talking earlier on about being able to get instant finance, buy now, pay later mentality creeping back into the retail sector. But you want to avoid nanny state at all cost. People should be allowed to make their own decisions, and people should be allowed to make bad decisions, because it was probably a good enough decision on the day that it was made. Good decisions turn into bad decisions because circumstances change. So it's about educating people how to avoid the situation, but more importantly, educating people to understand that if it was unavoidable, there is a solution.
I agree with you saying it starts in the classroom. I think that not quite sure. I'd agree with you, Richard, that I wouldn't worry about tomorrow's, the next generation. I do think that there is a general feeling about entitlement and quickness and easiness and convenience that if it permeates into debt, and I worry about things like buy now, pay later, and people not understanding the implications of that. But ultimately, I agree with you. It's about education, and education in the classroom. If we do that, it doesn't really matter about whether or not there's a convenience, quick and easy culture. They've been educated. So.
But I think as well, for lenders, when talking to customers who have got into financial difficulties, that responsibility, ethical responsibility, is not around only clearing that arrears event, but it is about making sure that 6 months, a year down the line, we're not back in arrears again. So again, it's this whole point around collections moving more towards an arrears resolution model. It's around making sure that the agents are trained, that we really understand the customer situation. We're putting in place good foundations for the customer to not only clear the arrears, but to stay up to date and move forward. And I take your point. I think we don't want nanny state. It's not about preaching to people, but it's about making sure that the tools through maybe online FAQs, the budget calculators, whatever the customer needs in order to stay up to date and on top of their finances is there. But I think life events happen, and with the best education and support in the world, there's always going to be people that are confronted with life events. And I think that we've got to be open to that and be there to support and help them. And I do think that's where, when we talk about things like debt signposting, what I've seen as a positive across the industry is that There's also more specialist signposting that helps people stay on track. So if people are struggling with mental health issues, they might be signposted to a special organisation like Mind. If they're struggling with grief and a deceased scenario, there's a lot of organisations that can provide that ongoing counselling and support. So it's coming at customers not just as having financial issues, but it's the life event around that. And that's how we keep people on a good path once they get up to date.
Yeah, it's a people business. It's people to people. Yeah.
And just a final point, because we've literally got 5 minutes. I think we could probably go on all morning with this. So thank you for that. Is we're talking about that moment in time where we're looking at a resolution on a collections call. But how can technology maintain that dialogue and that check-in and say, Vanessa, it's 3 months since we spoke to you and we did your income and expenditure. How's it going? How is it still affordable? But here's some additional support to make sure that, when that arrangement ends, this is that and the other. Who's doing that? Is that the next, have we got good practice in that respect?
I personally know across different financial services organizations that we work with, don't see that, but I think it is I think it's an important part of, there's a social aspect to this as well, that you're helping your fellow human beings to recover from that financial difficulty. It shouldn't just be, well, I'm getting paid, therefore I don't need to worry. People's circumstances can change. We often don't know. And so I don't know if any organizations are doing it. I think I'd applaud organizations that are. Certainly, it's something that I would say would be a great idea and help with that. Future difficulties in the past, the whole experience would be so much smoother if we did the right thing. That they were interested in me. They helped me along my journey. I'm not afraid that if next time I need to contact, I'm not afraid anymore. I think there's a big element to that for me.
I think the crucial thing with that, because in terms of the follow-up and the engagement with digital, one, if a customer's engaging with you digitally, punctuate that with a communication, and not an automated communication that comes as an end page on the site as they've finished interacting, as a follow-up email or letter if need be. And we certainly do as a business building processes to digitally mark that journey, to monitor it, to make sure that it's sustainable, that it's being sustained, and to follow up in any given period, depending on the product and the client's requirements, of course. So that you don't want to just shake hands with a customer, thanks very much, hope we don't see you again. We want to see you again. Even if you're maintaining the payments, we need to touch base with you. Can you still afford it? Do you need to pay less? Do you want to pay more? These are the things that you need to give the customer the opportunity to do, because the further they move away, the quicker they move away, the better it is for them. Most customers, I've said this for many years, even before the advent of digital, are looking for a moment of liberation. Once they engage with you, their primary objective is to solve the issue as quickly and as efficiently as they possibly can. Our obligation is to make sure that we don't overburden them. Your point, Mark, about affordability, maintaining payments is absolutely critical. It's more vital that they're in a sustainable position in terms of repayments than paying it down quicker.
Yeah. I think we're not in a place yet where I think most lenders are checking in 3 months after somebody's cured and is up to date. But I do think certainly in financial services, most lenders, if they haven't got it up and running, are working on pre-delinquency strategies. So data-driven strategies which will identify whether somebody is at risk perhaps of going into arrears again. And I think most lenders have got reach-out strategies there. And that might be bureau data showing that credit card utilisation rates are pretty high, or they've gone into arrears with another creditor, but they haven't fallen into arrears with you. So there is reach out there. But I think you raise an interesting point, Vanessa, and I think it's quite a good idea, worthy of further explanation. Once somebody's got up to date with their agreement, it's quite a big achievement, and it's a lift off their shoulders, a weight off their shoulders, and actually touching base with them a few months later to make sure that things are going okay and see if they need any additional help or steer, I think is good practice, but it's generally not good practice that's currently happening across the industry, I don't think. It's something to ponder for sure.
Yeah.
We will watch this space. That could not have ended on a better note, because our next session is all about consumer engagement. So hopefully the panelists on that session have been following this, and we can build on that conversation. Can I just say a massive thank you to our panelists, Frank, to Richard and to Mark. Look forward to seeing you, no doubt, on a future panel, and who knows, some of the ideas that we've discussed may well be in practice. So thank you very much. Thank you to our audience and the questions. We will finish there, and then we will return at 10:45, and we will build on that conversation on customer engagement. Thanks very much. See you
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.